let's talk college football futures in the Southeastern Conference. Looking at BetMGM right now, the SEC odds to win the conference championship. Alabama, as expected, minus 125, followed by the Georgia Bulldogs, plus 150. And then further down the list, Texas A&M, plus 1,200. Ole Miss, 25 to 1. But Jenks, as I said, it is extremely hard for me to bet on college football futures because it's so top heavy. And we see that. Alabama and Georgia, it looks like a two-dog race.
It sure does. Hold on, I'm going to smack my veins here. It's putting that college football right in my veins. Give me that college football heroin. I don't think that betting on Alabama at minus 140 is terrible. I get that they're the juicy favorite and it's not sexy and it's so tired. I get all that, but they still have Bryce Young at quarterback. Remember, they beat Georgia last year in the SEC championship game. And if you want to put some money on Georgia, fine, but they lost so many players. They had 15 players drafted. I get that they're going to restock, but I just believe in Nick Saban here. And I'm trying to find value down the list here. I don't believe it's with Ole Miss at 25 to 1 or Florida, LSU, both at 35 to 1. I know there's going to be a lot of people out there that are on Texas A&M because of the value at 12 to 1. And look, I'm a Longhorn. It's hard for me to be objective when it comes to the Aggies, but I feel like the Aggies are like a year away. They had an incredible recruiting class come in. Of course, Jimbo and Nick are going back and forth on that, but it's going to take, I think, another year before that class develops into being that class, that foundational class that moves forward and helps the Aggies compete for a national title. And also, you have to look at who they're going to play at quarterback, and they have a real competition going on between Max Johnson and Haynes King. Haynes King was a guy last year. He looked okay, didn't look great. He was shaky at times before he got injured. Max Johnson is transferred in from LSU, so he's the guy who probably gives this team the highest floor because of his experience in Baton Rouge. But I need to know who their quarterback is going to be before I move forward with a bet on the Aggies.
Right. For me, I think I need to see a couple games before I put a sprinkle on any of these teams. But I think the only teams you can bet on right now are the teams that have some big plus money to their names, just because there's no value on Alabama. Yes, they have proven that they deserve to be minus money just about every year. I think Georgia, I'm going to throw them out because, like you said, they lost a ton of players in the draft. And last year, it was teams saying, how are we supposed to compete against this defense? They have first rounders at every position on the defense, and that's really been the case. If you remember watching the NFL draft, there was a ton of guys from Georgia, including the first overall pick, Trayvon Walker from Georgia, going first overall to the Jags. So maybe there is some parity when it comes to the first few teams, but it is not a conference that, the bottom feeders are going to compete. Like, we're not going to see Vanderbilt really running the table. I think for me, maybe win totals are worth a look in this conference more than just who's going to win the SEC. Just because the problem with picking an SEC winner is, Texas A&M can have a great season. They can beat Alabama in the regular season, but still, if they don't win the SEC, you don't win any money. So I think this is one of those markets where I am not willing to risk my money.
What is the date? I'm looking at it right now.
It's October.
When they play Tuscaloosa? When they play in Tuscaloosa?
Texas A&M, Jimbo Fisher, Nick Saban,
that's what I'm
drama matchup.
I'm already looking forward to that. I cannot wait for that matchup already. You don't think all the hype surrounding that game, we're going to hear those sound bites of them going back and forth about recruiting classes. We're going to hear that again and again and again, and I'm here for it. And I can't wait for Nick Saban to put an old-fashioned butt whipping on Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M. They're not ready for Bama. Not yet. They're getting closer. They're getting very close with the talent they have brought in College Station, but they're not ready yet. And I think that's when Alabama is going to absolutely obliterate and show Jimbo Fisher who Alabama is. And listen, you also have the motivation from last year when the Aggies beat Alabama in College Station. So there's no way that they're going to catch Alabama off guard. I get why the Aggies are a trendy favorite at 12 to 1. That's a lot of value on a very talented team. But ultimately, I just don't think they're ready yet. And I look down the line, and it really is those top three teams for me. Every now and then I would say, okay, maybe you can make a case for this team or this team. I can't do it for anywhere else or anyone else on this list.
I think every year when you're betting on the SEC, the easiest route for me is taking a look at teams in the SEC East because generally that is the easier division to come out of. Because looking at the SEC West, like sometimes it just cannibalizes itself because you've got Alabama, you've got Auburn, you've got LSU and Texas. Like it's just such a tough division that it's really hard for me to believe that one of those teams is going to come out. So, and also you're just playing against Alabama. So I think the easier route is usually coming through the East. So I think maybe that's where you can get some value because obviously you make it to the SEC championship and you just have to beat Alabama once, which, it sounds a lot easier said than done, but still, I think usually the value's in the East.
No, you're right about that. And there are other ways to play this, which I think is probably the overarching point that we need to make because you can bet on win totals. You can bet on different divisions as well, as opposed to the overall conference. So if you don't like the value here, look elsewhere at BetMGM and find another way to get the value that you want.
Right. So this is the Daily Tip presented by BetMGM. I'm Chelsea Messenger. He is Michael Jenkins. We're on Twitch. Watch the Daily Tip along with each and every show on BetQL Live. Go to twitch.tv/BetQL. And as always, you can listen on the Odyssey app. Let's look at the Big Ten now. Ohio State, huge favorites to win the Big Ten, minus 250. Michigan, plus 900. And Wisconsin, plus 1,400. Penn State, 14-1. Nebraska, 20-1. Jinx, are there any plays on this one that you kind of like?
Maybe Michigan at 9-1. Maybe Wisconsin. I'm not going to lay the juice with. I'm just not going to lay the juice with Ohio State here, even though they're the obvious favorite. Here's the thing about Ohio State that scares me, and I love that they brought in Jim Knowles at defensive coordinator. And I talked about this, I think, probably last week, but when he was at Oklahoma State, he did a fantastic job because Oklahoma State is one of those teams that consistently overperforms. I love Mike Gundy, and he takes those three-star guys and turns them into a formidable unit year in, year out. So now they take him from Stillwater and they can improve on that leaky defense, which was their biggest issue last year. They had no issues on offense. It was just their defense. They just couldn't stop teams. We saw that when Oregon last year went to Columbus and took care of business against the Buckeyes. Michigan gives me a little pause because it's hard for me to think that it wasn't just 1 year where Jim Harbaugh broke through. And he had that 1 year, he finally get it done. But can he maintain that consistency? Can he keep Michigan right up there near the top and compete with Ohio State year in and year out? I'm not quite so sure that he can. And also, Michigan also has a quarterback situation. I generally worry when you've got a college football team that you want to put a future on and they haven't decided who they're going with the quarterback yet, because obviously that's the most important position on the field. You've got two quarterbacks in J.J. McCarthy and Cade McNamara. They've got a lot of weapons around those guys, but they need to decide who they're going with moving forward. I would probably stay away from the Big Ten here. If you want to convince me that Wisconsin on the other side of the division maybe has a better chance to upend Ohio State than the Wolverines, I'd listen to that. But this is really just Ohio State's conference to lose this season.
So let's look at some of the win totals for the Big Ten because I am not loving really the conference odds. Looking at Michigan, their win total 9.5, juiced to the over at minus 115. Michigan State over 7.5, juiced to minus 140. And I was kind of shocked to see Nebraska over 7.5, juiced to minus 125. And then Ohio State over 10.5, juiced to minus 200. Do any of those stand out to you?
No, not at all. I don't. I'm not big on Big Ten win totals or Big Ten futures this year, Chelsea. I think it really is a one-team race. Now, win totals, maybe I can look at and find some value there, but I've got to do a little bit deeper dive into this conference because the Big Ten is one of those that I do believe is just so one-sided that it's hard to find value elsewhere because we know Ohio State is going to win this thing. I know Double D, I'm killing him right now because he's on Penn State, but isn't Penn State – don't they have a 500 record over the past 2 years? Like, isn't it time for them to finally take a step forward under James Franklin and have him put together a team that isn't just a recruiting monster? Because I feel like at this point, Penn State should be more demonstrative and better than they have been.
I think personally that they will take a step forward this year. It all hinges, just like every other college team, football team, it all hinges on the quarterback. And you're going into year 7 of Sean Clifford. So if he can't produce, they're going to be that average team. But unlike other years, they have a running game this year. They have a running game, and their offensive line looks outstanding. This is a team that has been together for the past 3 years. So they've got some depth at O-line and running back this year, unlike past years.
Yeah, I have trouble betting on college football too. You guys are more college football people than I am. When does the transfer portal close for the season? Are we going to see any other splashy moves, or is it over?
I'm not exactly sure when the date is. I think you can, there's got to be some sort of deadline here. I'm not exactly sure when exactly that closes, but at this point, I don't think you're going to see any more splashy moves because if it's going to happen, it's got to happen now because all of a sudden you wait a few weeks longer, then you've got to acclimate yourself to a new team. You've got to learn the offense. You haven't gone through spring practices, which sets you back. So if you haven't made that move now, you're at a disadvantage and probably aren't going to help whatever team you go to.
Right. And I would imagine these teams, if they truly want you, especially at starting quarterback, they would have already made that call because these teams already probably have been learning the playbook, so on and so forth.